Mysterious Phantoms in the Forest Part 2. So I'm laying in my tent, freaking out, and trying to rationalize what I'm looking at. A lot of time goes by, and this thing just continues to watch us and move its body in really strange ways. I think about screaming, but the thing keeps coming down the side of the rock, and I am afraid it would jump onto our tents and kill us. After some time, I hear a hey. What the heck? Hey. Hey. What are you doing? It's my uncle. Suddenly, at like 3 a.m., everyone is awake. My female cousins are awake and confused, and two of my older male cousins jump out of their tent with an axe. For a few seconds, the thing stays completely still, but then my aunt and several of my cousins see it and they all scream. Someone finds a flashlight and they turn it on, but the thing jumps off the backside of the rock. A couple seconds later, it runs or gallops out from behind the rock, past our campsite. My uncle manages to shine a light on it for a second, and I still don't have any idea what I saw, besides the fact that the thing definitely didn't have clothes on but was naked and had a dark mark on its side that I mistook for spandex. We hear screaming and thrashing from another campsite, and several of the guys in our group go over and investigate. Whatever the thing was, it escaped into another campsite and ran into a small two-person tent. When the rangers got there, it was 4 a.m. and everyone was confused. My uncle and the people at the other tent say that it was a naked person. I definitely don't think it's a person, and thankfully two of my adult male cousins had also spent some time watching it and being absolutely terrified by it, so they agreed with me. We gave them all the details we could, and one ranger tells us that it was probably a coyote or mountain lion with mange. The other ranger looks really concerned, and I think he went off into the night to look for it. In any case, it was far too large for a coyote, and I've tracked mountain lions since college, and mountain lions do not move or look like that when they have mange. We all left and went home that night. Either there was a naked crazy person, a monster, or a mountain lion with mange running around, and it had spent at least an hour watching us. No thank you. We stayed in hotels for a couple of years after that, and I've camped there at least 20 more times since then, and I've never heard or seen anything like it since. It is hard to know what to make of any of these cases, and it all gets even weirder still as we begin to branch out into accounts that seem to be decidedly even more ghostly and paranormal in nature. One such report comes from a witness named David, who in September of 2001 was out camping with his girlfriend along a lonely, unpaved road in the Manzano Mountains in northern New Mexico. He says that on this evening the night was clear, and he was lying there awake listening to the sounds of the night when he suddenly heard a cacophony of barking and howling from just outside his tent, which he took to be a pack of coyotes. He says of what happened next. I turned over to see if my girlfriend was listening, and I thought I saw her leaning up from her sleeping bag on one elbow with her head tilted upward, looking toward the roof of the tent. She had a terrified expression on her face. I was about to laugh and ask her why she was so afraid of a coyote when I realized it was not her, but some sort of strange, dark figure with a distorted, translucent face. The figure was right above my girlfriend's body. It seemed that she, the spirit, had reddish hair and was wearing a black cloak with a hood. In my mind, I wondered, why are you so scared? I tried to get the spirit to look in my eyes, but it looked past me into the distance. I couldn't make eye contact. Soon the figure dissolved into thin air, and I could then see the top of my girlfriend's head as she was lying in her sleeping bag. The howling coyote was gone as well. What was going on here? Who knows? It seems that forests are indeed ground zero for utterly weird reports of supernatural phenomena and shadow creatures such as this. A witness on a Reddit hiking thread described a creepy encounter he had while hiking along an isolated mountain trail by himself in the late afternoon on a clear day. He describes the trail as being heavily wooded and running along the side of the mountain, with such a thick canopy of trees that even on this bright day, the sunlight barely trickled through the branches. For this reason, darkness began to creep up quite quickly as the sun continued its trajectory towards the horizon, and realizing that he did not have much light left, he began to hurriedly make his way back to his starting point, with no other hikers around and alone out there on that darkening slash of trail meandering through the steadily ominous-looking trees. The sun was already starting to hide behind some of the mountains, and the forest was already really dark. So I powered my way up the incline through the forest. The whole way, there was not a living soul on the trail besides me. I was already kind of creeped out being by myself on this trail, so I just listened to music and tried not to pay attention to anything else but the trail. As I was walking, I saw a black mass, about the size of maybe a rabbit or skunk, run across the trail. It definitely wasn't an animal because it was too fast and had no defined color, shape, or anything else. It was just a mass. It freaked me out a little bit, so I started to jog the trail. The whole time, I could see the light dwindling, and it was getting darker by the second. As I was jogging, I just had that feeling that something or someone was following me. I knew no one was behind me because the whole trip back, it was just me on the trail. I pulled out my pocket knife that I always carried with me in case I had to shank something or someone. About halfway through the forest, I grew tired from jogging, so I decided to just walk but keep a fast pace. As I slowed down, I had the urge to look back, and I did take a look over my shoulder a few times. I kept a fast walking pace for about a good half a mile or so, and I was close to the trailhead when I decided to look over my shoulder again. When I did, I saw a human-like black mass trailing behind me, about 30 feet or so. This mass had a definitive head and upper body shape, but anything below the waist was just a black mass. As soon as I noticed this mass, just in a blink of an eye, it darted straight into the trees. Of course, scaring the hell out of me, I darted for the trailhead. Thankfully, I was closer than I expected, and never was I so happy to see sunlight in my car. I was running so fast to my car that I didn't even realize that there were still people in the parking area of the trailhead who were getting ready to leave as well until I was sitting in my car shaking and trying to get myself together before I drove off. I haven't gone hiking since that day. Interestingly, the witness says he did some research in the wake of his terrifying experience and found that the trail he had been on was once used in the 1800s to travel between gold mining towns, then forgotten until the 1980s, when it was retraced. Whether this has anything to do with what he saw is anyone's guess. In another account from the Occult Museum, we have a witness who was hiking up a thickly forested hillside with some friends for the purpose of going up there to set off some fireworks. It was around midnight at the time, with a bright full moon set within the sky, and along the way, they passed through a rolling grass valley frosted with moonlight and covered with a light veil of fog, lending it all a rather eerie ambience. The witness describes the following frightening events. My buddies and I just hiked in a straight line through the rolling grass valley, approaching the hill, when something caught my eye. On my right, I saw a tall shadowy figure standing perfectly upright on the top of a small grassy hill. It was standing there, right next to a large dead tree. I couldn't make out any details, both the tree and the tall figure were silhouetted under the moonlight. The strange part was seeing this figure didn't scare me. I didn't immediately sense any threat. I almost assumed it might have been just another hiker or somebody having a smoke. I passively turned my flashlight on it, and that's when it happened. As soon as my flashlight hit the spot where this figure was standing, it moved instantly just outside the range of my flashlight. Like it teleported or something. But just as vividly as I saw it standing in its initial spot, as my light hit that spot and the figure moved, I could see it standing just outside the range of my light. My breath paused as a wave of dread washed over me. Something felt 100% unnatural about what just happened. As a reflex, I moved my light to the new spot where the figure was, and as my light passed it, it disappeared. I've never passed out in my entire life, not from heat, not from getting knocked out, never. But at that moment, I felt my knees give out from under me, and I just fell to the ground. My friends turned and looked at me as I tried to pick myself up, but my knees were too wobbly to stand. They helped me, and I tried explaining to them what I experienced. I'm willing to bet it was all just light or shadows playing games with my eyes. But I'll never be able to explain that sensation I felt of feeling like I had just seen something I shouldn't have seen, something so unnatural that my body's instinctual reaction to it was to go limp. I'm not convinced there is an afterlife or that ghosts or demons exist. But what I saw in the woods felt so out of place that it made me reconsider how I see the world. The Occult Museum has another fairly otherworldly report of a ghostly entity made by a witness called Devon, who was out camping with friends and walking near some cabins where someone was having a party with music wafting through the trees. They had a good campfire going at the time, the night was clear, and Devon says of what happened. It was a bright night, with all the stars shining, and the moon was well lit. There was a campfire going, and in one of the big cabins there was a party going on with music and so on. We were walking, and we both got a really weird feeling as if we were being watched. We both turned toward the sea. We saw a blue figure, very tall, about 7 feet, walking through the trees. It made no sound at all. It was a bright blue and glowing figure walking through the forest. It was emitting a shimmery aura, and my friend and I both became very frightened. We shouted at whatever that thing was, and we were asking it what it was. We got no reply, of course, but we expected one. We stared as it walked away and out of our vision, we didn't dare follow it. We then ran back to the group of people at the campfire, screaming and describing what we saw. Another friend of mine claimed he was watching it from a distance not far from where we were and was just as frightened as I was. Lastly, we have a rather bizarre ghostly forest encounter reported on the site Your Ghost Stories. This supposedly happened in the summer of 2011 in a wilderness area in Washington state, and rather than a camping tale, this happened outside of the witness home, which was isolated and surrounded by woods. At the time, he had a friend over, called Mike, and they went outside to take a stroll. This is where things get rather odd, very fast. He says, Mike and I had gone outside because it was too hot in the house, and we have a forest area in the backyard. Mike left before me, and I was to follow him out a few minutes later. I started walking outside and towards the forest. I usually look at the ground when I walk, but not this time because I needed to see where I was going. My paranoia got to me, and I expected Mike to be somewhere in the dark waiting to pounce on me and freak me out. Halfway to the forest, there's a little red barn that used to be a chicken coop. Once there, I called him, and he seemed to be near the trees, so I didn't have to worry about him trying to scare me. I continued walking, and as I got near the edge of the forest, I looked at the ground and happened to notice my shadow. Since I'm terrified of shadow people, the sight of it made me a little uneasy. As I looked up, I saw something glowing and white about 10 feet away from me and assumed it was Mike, but it couldn't have been, because Mike had worn all black that night. Its body was blurred a little bit, and it was kind of hard to comprehend. I kept watching it, and it just kind of slowly floated into the forest. After I saw it, I called Mike again, and he was in a completely different area than where I'd seen the thing, and he wasn't even in the trees, just near the end of them but outside of them. The figure I saw was about human size, but it was definitely not human. I only say this because no one wearing all white was around, plus when it went into the trees, it was not touching the ground at all. I never fully believed in ghosts until I saw this, and I wasn't ready to believe that every story on here was true. It looks like I was wrong. So now that there's a ghost out in my forest, can it get into my house and bother me? For me, that would be the scariest thing ever. These are just a few examples of the incredibly strange and often sinister weirdness that people have claimed to have encountered in the woods, and it appears that such places are veritable wellsprings of the strange. Here we have looked at strange creatures, ghosts, possibly demons, all inhabiting the dark corners of the forest, and one wonders if these places with their trees and rugged nature are somehow conducive to such phenomena, whether the very qualities of the land itself imbue it with a force toward which such anomalies gravitate. Whatever the case may be, it certainly gives you something to think about the next time you are out hiking or camping in the great outdoors.